It's Wellness Wednesdays. I need harmony for that. Anyway, working on it, still working on it, not permanent. Welcome to Wellness Wednesdays. Yes, this video is called Why Hurt People Hurt People. No, I'm not repeating myself. It's actually a thing. If you haven't heard it, hurt people is kind of a cliche. There will probably be a bunch of them in this video, but I still think it's important both for people who might be feeling guilty about, not their best moments, but also people who are like, why? Why would people do some of the things we're seeing kind of everywhere right now? There actually are reasons. And it's a little bit deep, but I'm going to try. And this is a bunch of stuff that nobody told me, and I had to figure out through life experience, a school of hard knocks, and one particularly good trauma counselor. So congratulations, you're getting this stuff for free. I had to pay thousands of dollars for it. So help support this channel. Become a monthly patron, patreon.com/LeannaK. So the whole phenomenon of why hurt people can come down to two main things. Obviously, it's a much more complicated thing, broad strokes than that, but getting reductive because it's a 30-minute starter video, why hurt people is broken down into two main buckets. One, unformed personal boundaries. More on that in a bit. Two, society, the way we are socialized, is utterly backwards and terrible in how it teaches people to deal with hurt, or more accurately, not deal with hurt. Let's start with the boundaries, because I brought it up first. We are not born with personal boundaries. We're, helpless babies reliant on adults to care for us and, literally feed us and wipe our butts. Boundaries are something that in healthy development form over time. By the time a kid is, between 4 and 6, they have an idea of them starting to be an individual, basically, do I feel like a boy? Do I feel like a girl? This awareness starts forming. Some people it forms as young as 2. But 4 to 6 is the general thing. By the time a kid is 10 or 12, they have a more of a sense of likes and dislikes. They start coming into that little person phase. By the time a kid is around 16, hopefully there is a basic ability to sort of say no. You're like, what? Right. In a great many cases, that process doesn't happen the way it's supposed to. Now, adolescence goes on physiologically well into the 20s, which is why I say anybody younger 30, I feel very protective of you. I'm far over 30. So I come by it honestly. But when you're going, what? By 16? Yeah. It took me till I was about 28 to really learn the word no. Because society loves to discourage people from saying no. And if you can't say no, you can't say yes from an empowered place. And it doesn't matter what your brain is doing right now telling you that's not so. It is so. And it's not just about saying no. It's about saying no firmly, definitively, without freaking out or melting down. And now people are like, okay. Most people are discouraged from saying no, from having strong boundaries, or at least saying not yet. And what ends up happening is that what messed up boundaries look like in real life is not what the TV cliches suggest they should be. Weak personal boundaries make it sound like somebody's just a pushover and never says no and just gets pushed around. But yes, those people exist. But most people who have boundary issues of what they call spiky boundaries. Healthy boundaries are actually sort of permeable. They're visualized by like a dotted line instead of a rigid shell, meaning sometimes you let people get away with shit. Other times you don't. But when you let people get away with shit, you know you're letting people get away with shit. You can still be flexible, right? But what people with early life trauma end up with is spiky boundaries. So some of it is like non-existent at points they're poking into the person. Self-harm, self-loathing, lack of self-compassion, all that stuff. But then they're spiky everywhere, meaning they lash out. Hence why people hurt people. Pretty much every kid who grew up where I did, there were notable exceptions that I can think of. They were very sweet people. Most of them that I can think of off the top of my head were from Muslim countries. I don't know why. Maybe because they were refugees. Just in my experience. Anecdotal. But a lot of the kids I grew up with, myself included, had very spiky boundaries. We were very raw, but really that raw was because at our core we were kind of pushovers. And we didn't want to admit it to anybody because we were walking around scared pretty much all the time. And that ties into the second thing I mentioned. And this is where we get to the what do we do about it? Because I don't like to do a Wellness Wednesday without what do we do about it, right? The thing I said about what society teaches about dealing with hurt, or more accurately, not dealing with hurt. What's the cliche? Don't let them get to you, right? Don't let it bother you. Here's the inherently stupid thing about that. If you have to be told, don't let it bother you, it's already bothering you. You have feelings for a reason. If something bothers you, the most self-destructive thing you can do in the world is to ignore that. It doesn't mean you have to say anything about it. It doesn't mean you have to like freak out and start, yelling or swearing or swinging or whatever. But don't let it bother you is the biggest lie society tells everybody. Something bothering you is proof that you are an individual. Something bothering you indicates the beginning of those boundaries forming. Because when people are very deep in trauma, when people are very, very damaged from abuse, they are numb. They do not realize things are bothering them. And that's it's always very when I work with other people with PTSD and they start talking about what's bothering them, they start admitting things are bothering them, they feel super duper weak, and I'm like I'm so happy the first time somebody actually proactively admits something's bothering them, because that is them feeling like they have value as a person. That's a huge first step. That is not weakness. That is individualization. That is self-actualization. You want that. But of course, what does society prop up? Nothing bothers me. It don't bother me. That is a lie. That is a lie. If nothing's bothering you, then you're not an individual. Being bothered is an indication that your boundaries are being violated. Again, you don't have to admit to anybody else except for yourself that something bothers you. But admitting that something is bothering you, being able to name that and sort it in the correct place, is how to stop yourself from being a hurt person that hurts other people. That's what allows you to stop the cycle of abuse. And why? Because if you can name something and put it in its proper place, it no longer controls you. The lie society gives us that stoicism is a control of emotions as opposed to a healthy processing of emotions, so it guides in the right place, right? That's a huge part of the problem. That's a huge part of the dysfunction. And this is a fairly recent thing in human history. If you read literature pre World War I, World War II, right? Because this is pretty much where it started. You read Victorian literature, read Sherlock Holmes. He's having nervous breakdowns and openly weeping and all that stuff. It's open. You read something like the Odyssey or the Iliad, and dudes are crying all over the place, right? We're like, what? You see the Greeks, the Greeks invented stoicism, right? So why are Odysseus and his men crying all over the place? Because stoicism isn't about not having any emotions. Stoicism is about feeling something, processing it, putting it in its proper place, and not letting it overwhelm you. It's kind of the opposite of catharsis. Then the world wars came, and everything became keep calm and carry on and stiff upper lip, which, okay, during massive periods of wartime, we get that, right? But that's never let up. And that's left us collectively as not having any space. And it manifests not leaving any space to sort of emotionally breathe, right? People spend their entire lives holding their emotional breath. It doesn't work that way. And this manifests most obviously in men. But women do it too. It started to become more aware in women. I think the reason women are seen as sort of better emotional communicators, that's not true across the board. Don't let anybody tell you it is. But at least, people like Betty Friedan had the wisdom in this case. She was dead wrong about lesbians, but on this she was right on the money. That, women were being prescribed things like Valium, Mother's Little Helper, so that they just didn't feel. And it left women feeling incredibly unsatisfied. All these things that the world was telling them would make them happy, fulfillment, keeping a home, keeping your husband happy, having children, waxing your floor 3 times a week. It wasn't fulfilling. And they put women on drugs and they drank gin in a teacup. Because of Betty Friedan's groundbreaking work and others like her, because of the introspection previous to Betty Friedan and people like Simone de Beauvoir, women started to kind of crack that nut, but we're still not there. Men never even had that. It's just, they tried it in the 70s, kind of, but it's not that men are less emotional than women. It's not that men are less emotionally connected than women. There just aren't as many lanes in society in that regard for men than women. But women, guys, ladies, anybody who's had a crazy ex-girlfriend, I shouldn't make that a binary, anybody, period, no matter what gender you are, who has a crazy ex-girlfriend knows not all women are in touch with their emotions. Because it's, don't let it bother you. That's nonsense. If you look at The Lord of the Rings, for instance, J.R.R. Tolkien had what they called back in World War I combat fatigue, which is now known as military PTSD. And the idea back then is that the best thing to do for somebody who had military PTSD or combat fatigue is to put them back out there so they can shake it off. Obviously, that didn't work. It's been cascading realms of trauma. People who served during World War I, people who served during World War II, Vietnam, Korea, and now, Afghanistan, Iraq, all this stuff, finally starting to try to deal with it. But holy crap, that's a lot of generations of people walking around emotionally walking wounded, right? That affects a culture. And Tolkien, in his sort of pothead wisdom, went back to the Greeks and created himself a space where not only was the guy that had to be carried across the finish line, because Tolkien got very, very ill and was sidelined through a large part of the war. He had trench fever. Not only was Frodo Baggins sort of a passive hero in the biblical model of Isaac, but dudes were crying and singing and all that stuff, the things that the Greeks did. And I mean, Tolkien was very, very aware of the classics. He was a linguist, that were lost World War I going forward. We'll get into the way the first Wonder Woman movie kind of reclaimed that some other day. But, ever since then, people have sort of been walking around, don't let it bother you. At some point, society has to take a breath. And I think that with this, with virus, with this COVID-19, people are finally going, WTF? So now's the time, right? Now's the time to break the cycle of hurt people hurting people. And here's how you do it. You do everything people tell you not to do. And people are going to shame you for it. And you may have to kick those people to the curb. Like, just, nope, they're not in your life anymore. And sometimes, with practice, you get to the point where somebody's in your life, but not really in your life. They're about as significant to you as a piece of furniture. There are some people in my life that like Mario mushroom in the background is more relevant to me than people, because I see the Mario mushroom every day when I'm making these videos. But that takes practice. You may need distance at first from people who will not let you grow in this way. 1, feel what you're feeling. 2, give it a name. This was actually something I learned through chronic pain stuff, not mental health stuff. There's a thing about people with chronic pain naming your pain. You may not have a word for it because it's this complex mix of things. So give it a name. Name it Bob. Name it Ralph. Name it Susan. Name it Aunt Lydia. Whatever you want, name it. Even if it's not a known emotion, name it. So your brain knows where to put it. Because systemized thinkers, most of us, right? The minute you can name it, the minute you can sort it, it starts making sense. And it doesn't overwhelm you. Right? If, what is this pokey thing? Well, this is a pencil. I know what that is. But imagine how kind of weird a sharp object coming at you would be if you didn't know what it was. I know that's silly, but I'm just making an example because this stuff seems very foreign when you first start doing it. But once you go, oh, this is a pencil. It's used for writing. Oh, this is my purple feeling, right? That's how I had to start. I didn't have names for things, but I knew I felt a color, right? I have that weird, I forget what you call it when, sounds and numbers are associated with colors. I forget the name of it right now. But so it was like, okay, that's the yellow emotion. That's the red emotion. That's the purple emotion. That's the black emotion, right? All right, fine. At least I could sort it. Nowadays I have names, like actual names that other people understand, but other people don't need to understand your emotional names at first. You need to understand it. Because then you get into the complex layering of emotions. Purple is red plus blue, right? That could mean for you anger plus sadness. Just anger and just sadness. They're very different things than something that's like anger plus sadness, right? Emotions are complex. And it's very important that you're able to identify, am I angry? Am I scared? Am I sad? And this sounds nuts, but if you're not used to naming and sorting your emotions, I'm telling you, you probably don't quite know what you're feeling, never mind understand it. We know when we're dealing with another person. We don't treat an angry person the same way we treat a sad person, the same way we treat a frightened person. But when we're dealing with ourselves, we often don't give ourselves that same nuance and compassion because we're too busy trying to not let it bother us, not feel. You know, why do you think that horrible song from Frozen took off so much? You know, conceal, don't feel, don't let them in. You know, like, what is it? Never mind. You know what I mean? Conceal, don't feel. That's a line in Let It Go. And it's this big, the perfect girl is gone, the whole thing. And then it just, here I'll stand, let it go. Like, you can't let it go until you can get a hold of it. And that's kind of left out, but it's an 86-minute Disney movie, so yeah, they cut corners. But there's a reason that caught on. And there's a reason little girls like the music. They don't quite get it yet, but there's a reason moms are so weepy and they're secretly fine with like letting their little kids watch Frozen 400 times. The 500th time gets sick of it. Enough Frozen trauma. But we collectively know something's wrong, but we've lost the emotional vocabulary to know quite what. We're back to what Betty Friedan was talking about with the mystique, right? The number of people who are acting all the world like they're angry. I encounter this all the time, and it's like, oh, red flag, definitely yellow flag of the play. But is it, look, I get that you're angry, but I'm not angry. Well, if you're not angry, then what's going on? You know? Okay, they're not angry. They're using expressions of anger, those spiky boundaries, to hide usually fear. And fear is the hardest emotion to admit to yourself you're feeling. Because fear is scary, right? Sad sucks. Angry is tiring, but fear by its very definition is scary. But that's precisely why you have to admit to yourself you're scared. Because the problem is people mask fear with anger, that lashing out, and everybody treats them like they're angry instead of scared. And that compounds the feeling that there's something wrong with them because they're not getting what they need. They're getting what they communicate they need. Most people have a level of empathy. People say people with autism don't have empathy. No. A lot of people I know with autism are highly, highly empathetic once they know what's going on. You know? Once they know, oh, this person is sad. They care that you're sad. Sociopaths don't, but they're a minority of the population. Most people actually give a damn if someone is scared, provided they know a person's scared. If you're acting angry, if you're all raging and yelling and lashing out and spiky boundaries, everything, don't expect people to know you're scared. And if you never let anybody know what you're really feeling, nobody can support those feelings. Nobody can validate those feelings. And you can't feel safe around anyone. Because, you can't take a breath of fresh air if you never open a window. You're just stuck in a hermetically sealed room smelling your own emotional farts. And a lot of you probably laughed and then nodded because that's what happens when you can't actually admit, even to people who have your back, what you're really feeling. And that's what trauma does. And that's why trauma is so difficult to overcome. And it is okay to not know what you're feeling at first, because trauma causes you to shut down and you have to sort of slowly peel that back layer by layer. But that's why I'm saying you don't have to worry about a name for a feeling that anybody else understands at first. You just have to name it for yourself. And don't overthink it. The first thing that comes to mind. It can be a smell. It can be Beer was a feeling for a while because that was a scent trigger I had. Um, you know, um, who knows? A feeling connected with a particular song. You don't have to get the emotional words right. It's not about getting it right. Stop thinking about right or wrong answers. It's about giving it a name that makes sense to you. And then, you can do this yourself, but if you've got someone to talk to, you can do it with them. You could tell them you have an emotion named, I don't know, whatever, Sam. I've been talking about Falcon and Winter Soldier today, can you tell? You have an emotion named Sam. Okay, what is Sam associated with? And you can start unpacking it. And then you can go, okay, Sam is this mix of sadness and fear and regret and, a little bit of, yeah, okay, that's kind of funny. But you can start separating into its component parts. And then when you start feeling Sam or purple or beer, then you go, okay, I know what this is now. And it processes instead of doing the emotional equivalent of throwing up in your own mouth, right? You want things to go through. You want things to digest. You don't want you don't want the mouth barf. You don't want that reflux, right? That's not pleasant. You want it to digest. And how does digestion work? It gets broken down into its component parts and processed into something your body can use while the waste is expelled. Emotions are the same. And you can't get that healthy, productive, post-traumatic growth process if you don't let it break down. Now, first, you're probably going to feel like you literally have an upset stomach. Again, sit with it. Recognize what your body's doing. Recognize what you're feeling. Yes, this takes time. This means still, stop, don't speak, don't type, don't tweet, don't text, count to 10. 10 is not a magical number. Count to 20, count to 30. It takes practice to be still, but it's really important, especially early on when you're trying to figure out what the hell is going on. Try it. I have a rule for myself. I don't respond to something until I can name what I'm feeling, at least to myself. Even if it's just a color. If I can't do that, I don't speak. Because I got into trouble, I went spiky before I learned to do that. And again, it doesn't have to make sense to anything but you. But your feelings, your reactions to things, the things that make you happy, the things that make you scared, the thing that makes you angry, the things that make you sad, that's what makes you you. And if you don't validate that, if you don't give that value, no one else can. Because no one can know for sure what's going on with you until you know what's going on with you. Okay? Okay. Hopefully that helps. You find this helpful. You think it helps somebody else. You share this video with a friend, and you can help support this channel. Become a monthly patron. Patreon.com/LeannaK. Thanks for watching on Wellness Wednesday. Boss fight tomorrow. Thanks for watching.